everyone. My name is Nisha Sinha, and it is my pleasure to host yet another discussion for volunteering for seniors and lead in its mission in creating awareness about senior citizens, their needs and issues, and how we as a community can extend our support and become an ally to their families and caregivers. Through volunteering for seniors, webinars, talk shows, and conferences, our mission is to bring communities and medical experts together, focusing on supporting health and self care for seniors and caregivers of older adults. Today's topic is challenges in long distance caregiving. In contrast to a generation ago, it's become a common issue for families to live in different cities and states, and even in different countries. In such cases, long distance caregiving can take an enormous toll on your personal, family, and work life. Today, we have Pratima Penumarthy, founder and CEO of Volunteering for Seniors, Rima Pande, a healthcare strategy consultant based in Boston, who has also published her book, and Dr. Rohit Chandra, Board of Director in Volunteering for Seniors, who are joining today to have a discussion on what are the challenges that caregivers face in taking care of their parents or their older adults in the family when they cannot stay in the same city or in the same place. So I would like to welcome Pratima Penumarthy, who is going to introduce the topic and our guest today. Welcome, Pratima.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nisha, again for your wonderful introduction. Um, Welcome, everyone. So today's topic is something which is, again, very close to a lot of caregivers, and we all have been in that situation and still, um, some of us are still taking care of our parents at long distance. So there are a lot of challenges that one faces, when we come to long distance caregiving. So to talk about that today, we'll be having a small discussion forum today, which we don't have many for, having a big talk about it. But the main point, what we wanted to, focus here is it definitely all of us can agree that caring across miles, it has become increasingly very common today for many family members to live far away from one another. So whether that distance is for job, can be education, simply by choice, or the miles have become challenging, and it has been and when an aging long distance, aging long distance loved one needs care, the whole situation comes into picture where it's very hard. It's not easy for everyone. Acting as a long distance caregiver has never been easy, but I think my personal way of just looking at this is by getting more organized, utilizing available resources, which is available to most of us, technology, and focusing on the positive, we all can, but positively, we all still, we can do a world of good for aging loved ones, even from far away. But there are so many challenges, as we talk about it today. Just to join and talk more about this, we have with us Rima Pande, who is a healthcare strategy consultant, and she has a strong passion for human-centered healthcare, also equitable socioeconomic development. Rima has recently published, but that's one thing we're going to talk more and learn from her about her book, His Voice, which is a journey through her father's mind, where, mind to share his unspoken thoughts and his emotions during the 2 years that he was paralyzed, due to stroke and was unable to speak. She definitely enjoys parenting and having her with her beautiful, amazing kids. And she loves unstructured cooking, and maximum loves also traveling. So also with us, we have again our Dr. Rohit Chandra, who is one of our very important board members of VFS, and he's a child and adolescent psychiatrist at MGH Chelsea Healthcare Center. He's also instructor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. And in fact, he serves on the boards of the Teen Mental Health Initiative and also for our VFS. So with all of them in this today in our discussion, we have also with us Nisha, where we're going to talk little more and challenging things which each one has faced, and and then eventually drop by and work about what are the tips we can talk about it. So to just to begin this conversation, Rima, could you share with us what were your challenges that you faced when you had to take care of your parents, or say parents, your dad, across miles?
Thanks, Pratima. Thanks for inviting me to this conversation. And just let me set some context really quickly. So as you said, I'm based in Boston. My parents were based in Delhi. Happen to be an only child, but this is not a situation that's specific to only children. It just so happens to be that I am one. Um, so when my father had, he had two strokes in succession, and it was really after the second one that he was left paralyzed neck down and unable to speak. And I traveled, when he had his first stroke, then I traveled back when he had his second stroke, and we ended up bringing him home with creating, kind of almost like a nursing home at home situation, where he was taken care of with my mother being the primary caregiver. Other support that she needed in terms of physical care with an attendant, as well as a physical therapist, and all the equipment that he needed, etc., etc. And so I was, these are situations which I think many of us face. There's a saying I read actually just yesterday that someone had sent me, which said, if you think about care, I think this is in the context of caregiving, that there are four types of people in the world: those that have been caregivers, those that are caregivers, those that will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. So I think as we went through this situation, one of the big challenges I focused on, and I'll talk a little bit about the long distance caregiving, was the fact that my father was in a situation where he couldn't communicate. And so the book that you talked about is my effort at representing his thoughts, or his perspective, or what I think were his thoughts and emotions during those 2 years. I learned a lot in those 2 years. It was obviously personally challenging, less so physically, but definitely mentally and emotionally. And like you said, all those challenges get kind of magnified and amplified when you're not there all the time. And so you have to figure out how to, be there, be supportive, but also balance the rest of your life, right? And when it's geographically separated or distinct, that challenge gets a little more complicated than it would be. I think one of the reason I published this book, is at the individual level. I hope that it's a book that, just sharing the story will help people pause and reflect and kind of appreciate the key relationships in their lives. Because one of the things you really, when something like this happens, you kind of realize how there's a lot of regret about how little sometimes that you did, how little you, in my case, I was like, do I really know my father? Even it's too late, even at the basic level, because you look at people often in the context of the relationship you have with them, and not as whole individuals, if that makes sense. But I'm hoping that this is a book that will help people think about that a little bit, and also empower those who are caregiving, or in the future might be giving care or taking care of someone. And secondly, I'm hoping that I can advocate more actively, both in India and here, for more discussion on palliative care and caregiver support systems. So a lot of the work that you are doing is absolutely critical.
Thank you. Thank you, Rima. Actually, this is a point which I wanted even now, Nisha, to add on, like, because this is
Mhm.
something we all have and we are still facing it. Although every family is different, we know that. And Rima, I know you'll agree, and Dr. Chandra will agree that research has shown that there's still many challenges that long distance family caregivers are all facing. Um, Nisha, if you can just share in your own words, like what do you think, with even with this long distance caregiving, what you're facing, in your case. It may not be general in your case, but related to you, and anything which is close to your cases isn't that more fighting feelings and fighting feelings of guilt, right? That comes into picture. So could you just share, like, how do you think that is also another very big thing which is really affecting most of us and one of the biggest challenges in long distance caregiving?
So, Pratima ji, I think you are bringing out some of the very critical points that Rima ji just shared. So, I would just reiterate the fact that, especially on the generation who are the first generation to shift continents and live so far away, we are exploring a different concept of caregiving, which is specifically addressed as long distance caregiving. And yes, it is taking a toll on emotionally, physically, and the greatest challenge is you cannot be there when it is needed the most, and more so because of the conditions that are developing in the world right now, where the first thing hit is the travel. We have
Yeah.
seen in post-pandemic time that the first challenge that we face is, no matter how much resources we have to fly to go back to our country, no matter how much willingness we have to go back to our caregivers, but when we are tied by the socioeconomic conditions developing around the world, that's where the helplessness takes a toll on our families
Yeah.
and on younger generation of my generation, who are like the first one to come and live in different continents. And we have so many young people in different parts of the world right now. So and another challenge that I feel is there aren't enough dialogue happening. Like when we
Mhm.
meet as a community,
Mhm.
we do offer support to each other in surviving here emotionally, but we are not yet we are not yet open to having a dialogue. Okay, what are your challenges you're facing as far as care giving is concerned to your family or to your extended family in the country? So yeah, I would love to hear from Dr. Rima or Dr. Chandra, about this thing. That do you hear, and how? What are your suggestions when you hear from families that emotionally, because that is something that we cannot have an easy solution to once you're tied to travel restrictions, and then how do you explain it to your parents, to the older adults, or to the extended family out there? What are your challenges that you face living here?
Mhm. So I can comment. I mean, I love what Rima ji said and what you said, Nisha ji. I think there's so many threads to pick up here. So I was born in the U.S. My parents are Indian immigrants. They came in 1960 and 1970, and they saw their parents pass away in India. All four of their parents passed away in India. So two died after extended illnesses, and two passed away rather peacefully, just of old age. But watching my parents kind of struggle with their parents aging and deaths, I think was very instructive. A few points that we can maybe pick up later. Family dynamics really come into play when there's long distance caregiving. There's sometimes one family member that's taking care of the parents, living with the parents, or is otherwise close to the parents physically, and others are away. The person who's living with the parents may or may not have been the family favorite or the eldest, and so there may be dynamics about I'm doing more of the work, my siblings are not doing as much, or someone feels very guilty that they're not able to be there, and feels like a sibling is doing more. There may be resentments that kind of build around that, so that's fairly complex. But obviously, it's quite sad to be away from our beloved parents when they are when they're ill and dying, and it's just not easy to be there at all times. I have a friend who's in the acting troupe with me, and her father passed away rather suddenly. This was not a sort of caregiving situation, but passed away rather suddenly in September. She couldn't be there before he died and didn't get a chance to say goodbye. And I think the absence of being able to say what we want to say to our loved ones, to our parents, the absence of being able to ask them the questions we wanted to ask them before they die, these are crucial things. My siblings and I have done some digital storytelling with our parents in order to really get at the family stories and really hear them, record them, because we don't want to have those unanswered questions. Those, we want to be able to talk to our parents about what's important before they pass away. Mm-hmm. So, and we'll talk about palliative care later, but there's so much there. I think you're so right, Rima-ji, about how important it is and how useful it is to get it brought on early, but that's always often a challenge to know when. So thanks.
I wanted to bring this to even Rima Pande here, is that Rima, one of the biggest challenges which I was discussing, right? I was talking about knowing when you're needed and when you're not is the biggest thing. Is when you are in US and when our parents are in any other country, right? The further, everything the further, the more you think like your own perception of the problem, right? Not to mention the fear part is that we keep on thinking, is my parents' health at stake, right? Will traveling to our parents' home, will it even provide a long-term solution, or is it only just a temporary, right? These are things which always, and I know that in your case too, like when you had to go and take care of your father back there, you're working here. So how did you meet up that challenge, and how did you forego that challenge?
The first part of your question was about, knowing when to be there and when not to be there. And I think that is hard. Of course, when there's an acute event that happens, that kind of gives you, kind of a clear direction about, okay, this has happened. My father's had a stroke. I need to be there. But in situations where parents have kind of longer term, kind of a longer term chronic situation, like, so fine, it's important to be there when he had a stroke. Now, after that, he's home. So there's no, acute situation happening, or at least if an acute situation happens, we can't plan for that. So in that situation, it really is about maximization, I think, of your presence, and whether you maximize that presence by being there physically, or, if you cannot be there physically due to your own personal situation, or like world events or pandemics or whatever that might be, is how do you stay connected? So you may not, be the person providing physical care, but I think the emotional support for the primary caregiver is also key, because in this situation where someone like my mother, and there are many such situations, it's just my personal example, my mother is taking care of her spouse, which she is, and she's kind of channeling all her time, energy, resources, thinking, really leading from the front, setting an example for everybody else. There's a huge load on her, right? There's a huge mental load on her. She's worrying. There's constant anxiety. There's like grief and sorrow, which she cannot express in front of the patient. There's loneliness. It's a very lonely situation to be in. There's always this pressure to kind of stay strong and happy, because you're responsible for keeping the patient's emotions positive, or the caregivee, if that's a word their emotions positive. So I think being there or supportive is kind of is really important to the extent possible, and whether it's phone calls or video calls or just agreeing with what the person say, because there's a lot of doubt in a caregiver's mind in such situations. Am I doing the right thing? So to the extent as a secondary caregiver or long distance caregiver, you can just say yes, you're doing your best, and this is you're making the right decisions.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times I've seen situations, and I saw that with my grandparents and others there, where there were siblings who weren't there, were far away, but would constantly give advice and correct people who were actually on the ground. And I think so. There's certain things that so there's certain things you should do, and there's certain things you absolutely should not do. If you're not there, and if you can't say, they say if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything. I think that becomes very important in such situations. Just keep quiet. So to cut a long story, I've answered this in a very long way, maybe, but be there as much as you can is what I would say, to the extent possible. And that, at least that was my...
Rima, because you just said about very good point here, when people coming and advising. But actually, every time you do feel, I think as a caregiver, I have felt, and I've taken care as an only child for my parents, where feeling out of loop thought always comes, right? Because when circumstances prevent you from personally overseeing the care of your loved ones, it can be very comforting to know that you have some sort of home care solutions available. But how do you expect that in a country like our country, where we come from? Like, there are so many countries like India where, unlike US, you don't have many home care solutions. You don't have people who are having some sort of running some home care softwares, making it easily possible for them, connecting them with resource agencies and telling them, okay, those resource agencies having a case manager like how we have here, and they look care of those seniors. And we don't have anything like that back there. So coming to my situation too, because that's exactly where I faced the same thing, because my father also had stroke. My mother was also a patient, and it was very, very difficult to be at a long distance. And then I always felt that even though I kept on calling and, making sure the messages are passed and someone is there to take care of them, definitely no technology. Technology can help in one extent. Definitely phone calls do help to some extent, but they allow to, of course, bridge the distance between you and your loved ones, putting some of your doubts to rest, but not to a great extent. And that's where, when I couldn't do for some time, just financially helping is not enough in life, right? Some people don't need that. Yeah. What you need more than that is, as a caregiver, I felt like there was a lot of feeling of guilt, which we always talk about it, right? Yeah. And then a point came where I was trying to see where I could find a balance, and that so-called getting a balance was very, very difficult to get that balance, right? You get overwhelmed. I mean, that you have been in the position, I was in the position, like, we all get overwhelmed, and that's so natural because you got only so much on your plate, right? And you can do only so much. And then you're trying to find out a right balance. And then you have people, like you correctly mentioned, you have a lot of people who give you advice from one end, who are your so-called relatives, or, I mean, they think good about you, but sometimes it's overwhelming for us, to try to get so many advices where they say, hey, why can't you come every now and then? But it is not possible. That's what I wanted to always tell, is that it's not possible, as clearly people keep saying, that because you work in abroad, you can come, how can you go monthly, or twice in a month? How can you go and meet because of the distance? And it's very difficult. That's why. And again, we had to work out and find out how we can get a balance, which was so difficult compared to now what I'm seeing, because now we have more of virtual things coming up. Yeah. Because I can test it 10 years before, when I had faced that situation, it was so hard. It was just a phone call, right? And in the phone call, if you know that, in just making a call to our parents, you can get everything. You cannot give, like, for example, your mother was a caregiver. When my dad had stroke, my mother was a caregiver at that time for my dad. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult. How can you constantly keep talking, right? And giving her confidence and say, Mom, I'm here. I'll provide you everything, but don't worry, you'll be taken care there. But no, you need somebody there in person. And that's where I wanted to even ask, like if you see Dr. Rohit, we have in this country, we have so many resources. When I talk about resources, sometimes I tear up because I wish all other countries also have these type of resources for seniors who are all alone, right? You don't have there, and you have only few section of people. If you're really lucky, you have a few section of people who have a lot of support system there. But then there are a lot of people whose support system is so less that they just give you certain tips and tools. Hey, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this, but you're left alone to bear everything. So lots and lots of, I have seen that the biggest thing is feeling of guilt has killed internally a lot of caregivers in this country whose parents are far away. And about what Rima was mentioning is that, Dr. Rohit, is when the biggest thing I talk, is that how should we evaluate, right? How can we evaluate what we can do on our part? So this is where I want to ask Dr. Rohit, and this is what I think, and you can tell me, what else one can think about doing, is that how we can evaluate this. Like you
great point. So I want just to echo what Rima ji said. I think it's an excellent point that it's the people who are in the trenches there with the loved one typically know the ground realities. They know what's happening. Those who are not, I think, often do feel guilty and want to offer advice, maybe to alleviate their guilt or feel like they're contributing. But often the advice is not helpful advice because they are not listening carefully enough and just don't get what is happening. So it is probably doubly frustrating for the caregiver who is there, or can be doubly frustrating, the caregiver who is there, who's saying, I know what I'm doing. I'm telling you, this is not the situation that you think is happening, but you're giving me this advice. So there can be conflicts that arise there. One situation that did go well, and this was not one where the loved one was in India, but I have a Mausi in Maryland, a mother, sister in Maryland, and her father-in-law was dying, and her husband's nephew, who's a palliative care physician in Oakland, California, he recognized quite quickly that his grandfather was dying, and he said, please get him into hospice, and he arranged hospice from across the country. And this was really necessary. His grandfather, basically, was having sort of breathlessness at rest, and this was, way before COVID. And he, and this palliative care physician recognized this is a sign that my grandfather is really dying, and we need to get everyone kind of together. And so people flew in, and they got to pay their respects and say goodbye. And this was really an ideal death. But it's difficult from afar in general to make good decisions because you often just don't know, you can't really judge properly. But of course, if someone has the expertise, then it's useful. But otherwise, usually the caregivers really know what's happening, and really one has to listen to them and take their advice and just, kind of follow if needed. My mother likes to say, lead, follow, or get out of the way. And often we don't get out of the way, and we don't follow properly because, it's easy to offer advice, easy to hear something and shoot from the hip. But the person says, no, things are much more complex than you think. You don't understand the complexities. I'm torn between two things to do. There are pluses and minuses to both. And the person, it's very easy. Do A, don't do B. It's not so easy. So it's really quite complex.
Yeah, can I just just add to that a little bit? Pratima used the words not being in the loop. Now, not being in the loop is our problem. It's us thinking we need to be in the loop, but that's not the most important thing, us being in the loop, unless, as Rohit said, we are in a position to give concrete advice, or there's a very clear path forward that we can help support. And so to me, it's important. I always felt I really needed to be in the loop on a daily basis. Yeah. But then my mother's exhausted, and giving me like a blow-by-blow account of everything that happened that day is not the best use of her time. It's not the best use of the conversation we're having. The best use of that conversation is for me to say something, have a conversation that makes her feel better. And, it might be more helpful to her to hear about what my kids are doing here. Something funny that happened with them. He said this is what happened, than to spend the whole conversation, kind of grilling her. You don't want to be grilling them and saying, tell me what happened. And then as a follow-up, oh, but why didn't you do this? Oh, did you meet the doctor? Why didn't you ask them that? And there's a lot of that happens in such situations, but that's a reflection of our own anxiety and our own need to kind of be there and be involved. Yeah. And really we're just I think that puts an additional load on the primary caregiver. It makes them defensive for no reason. They have no reason to be defensive. So, when you're long distance, when you're secondary or tertiary, whatever, however you want to see yourself, your role is really just to be very, very supportive. And if your opinion, in our case, we're lucky, our opinions kind of aligned in a lot of situations, but there are situations where, especially when you talk about something like palliative care, where opinions diverge. And if your opinion diverges dramatically, you kind of have to remember that you're not there. Mm-hmm. And there's no perfect solution, even if you were there. It's not like you would have created magic just because you were there. It's not like I would have done something dramatic by being there, right? It's not. And sorry, I'm kind of going on about this, but I think this is really important about being long distance and kind of understanding your role. Being supportive.
So well said. I mean, we're often trying to alleviate our own anxiety, like you said. We're often trying to alleviate our own guilt by getting the information. But like you're saying, I mean, it seems like it's so important to support the caregiver. If the caregiver is trustworthy and displays good judgment and is really attuned, then ideally we support the caregiver emotionally, and then say, what can we do to help you help our loved one? That would be ideal.
Yeah, so it's like planning for a doctor visit that's coming up versus questioning what already happened. So if a doctor is going to come the next day, sometimes I would help her make a list of questions, just because you forget. There's so much going on that you forget. So that was an example of.
So personally, for me, I am also staying away from my parents and my in-laws. Yes, talking about solution, I feel it is too early to dig our heads into solutions, because these are not easy path. But I'm glad that volunteering for seniors is providing a forum for all of us to come together and at least open our hearts, and also stand up as an inspiration, or as an encouragement to other people, that it's okay to have some guilt, but it is equally important to have a dialogue, and it is equally important to come and be part of a forum like this and share what are you dealing with. We might not have a solution yet, but at least we can start talking and start creating an awareness, because emotional well-being of the caregiver is equally important. And what I have personally learned today from Dr. Rohit, Chandra and Rima, from both your dialogues, is family dynamics matters a lot. And it becomes more so challenging when you live away. Like Rima, you have been a single child, and the rest of us have one or more sibling. So, creating a dialogue with our sibling who is taking care of the older adult there, and then us who are living so far away. So I think family dynamic plays a very important role for the peace of the mind of our older adults and us. And Pratima, what are your thoughts on, when you have one or more sibling, and if they are living in different parts of the world, how do you create that dialogue? How do you create that harmony where yes, your role should not be taken as a follow-up. Or like, every time you ask, it should not be taken as, oh, you're questioning. And yes, the pattern of caregiving back in a country like India is very traditional. And here it might be a little more structured, where you have more available resources. So, I would really like to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, that's a very good point you asked, Nisha, and also you explained so well what organization is doing for starting this forum. But the most important thing I believed and what I did, I consider myself a lonely kid for taking care, even though I have a sibling. I take all the responsibility, so I consider myself as a single person taking care of my parents. It is there with many, many families too. It's not just me. So many people are facing that situation. Even with my other sibling, we always say we need to have an emergency plan, right? And I'm very particular about that. Like if our loved ones, whether here or any other country, even within US in different states, if we have an emergency, we need to have a plan in place, so that we can be there on a short notice. And then we have to support. And let me now like divert to myself to what can be within the US system first. Here we can always set up a support system of people too, right? Who can set it for you while you are gone. Like that's what I do. Like, for example, even though now I'm fully taking care of my father here, I have situations where I have to go long away for seminars or meetings, then I manage, I try to talk to certain support system type of people who can come and take care of my parent when I'm not here. We have to do that. That's all comes with respect to how you create a plan and work on it. I don't have to rush for looking for my sibling. I don't have to keep on calling, can you be there? Because I know even in this country, I've seen people talking that, hey, I have sibling, but no sibling comes to help. It's only me doing everything. But they too understood that if you have exactly a good support system, that's what we come into picture, right? We try to help anyone who just needs some, basic help, or connecting them to resources who can give them another big support system who can help them. And the number two, I believe it's stay connected. Most important thing, stay connected. Because whether my family or any other families, I always say schedule conference calls. It's not just one person scheduling, right? If you are having 2 or 3 siblings, they need to schedule conference calls even with their physicians. If they're living in a senior living community, they need to even schedule calls with them, with their staff, to get up-to-date information about their parents' health. Even if it is an alone child who's taking care, they can catch hold of certain relatives, certain support systems who they can trust more, like forget even relatives. You have a neighbor who's you can highly trust your good neighbor, who regularly checks on your parent. You make sure that you have that conference call, stay connected with them, even if you're far away. And of course, I think for me, I believed in my case, like phone calls and emails, they were the best ways for me to reach out when it was in long distance, to make that relationship strong. Neighbors helped a lot in my case, when I was taking care. One thing I have seen, which Nisha was also talking about, is that distance is always a biggest challenge. And I feel it is manageable, but you need to have some strategic planning. And you always need a team effort. And when I say team effort, I don't just directly count my siblings in that. What I count your strategic planning is, what are the different ways I can do? Who are the people who are highly connected with my parent, right? Mm-hmm. And like in your case, whether it is Rima or Nisha, in your case too, or when your in-laws are there or your parents are staying alone, the biggest thing you have to look is there a neighbor? Is there a friend? Is there someone who's staying above their house who can really come down quickly and really help them? And that's what I did, is that my immediate neighbors of my parents, I made sure I connected with them. And I had conference calls even with them, making sure I didn't call my sibling, but I first called them. And I made sure, did you make sure everything is fine with them? Is there anything? They were the first people who constantly texted me, who constantly called me and said, uncle needs this, auntie needs this, these type of things. That really helped. So having that relationship and staying connected is most important. You may be far away, but having that connection with families and friends is very important. And that's what everybody needs to learn. And I'll tell you, this is my personal scorn for many questions when, people consider like, oh, what do, people do living abroad and taking care of parents. That's no sense. They need to be there in person. You know what I'm saying? Most of the people give you advice, like,
Yes.
and then you say, oh, what support you give from there? You're giving them only financial support. No, I think long distance too, we can give financial support, emotional support. You can give companionship. You can listen to them. I do that even now to my great aunts who are like 90s and some are in late 80s. I just call to just listen to them. They don't need financial help. What they need is that companionship. That's what they need. So it's so wrong when some people say to you that you're staying far away, so you can't do anything for them. You can do a lot. I think there's a flexibility. Not everybody has flexibility. I wanted to really bring this down with all this discussion, is that not everybody are lucky to have that flexibility, that you can work from, hey, I can take because I'm an IT engineer, I can go to India and work, I'm in research, so probably I can get opportunity. You can get, but I think you have to work it out, which is best for you, which is best for you. And that is more important. It's not easy as people think, like, you can stay, you cannot do. And how many people who are there in the same country, how many are really taking care of their parents? That ratio is less too, right? Staying far away, there are people who are living far abroad, like what you did, Rima, what I did, is that we stayed far away, and what Nisha is doing, we are all far away, but we're still taking care of them. Right? So what is biggest thing we need to ask for people is that the biggest thing, taking care is important, but everyone does their best. I consider this very important, is that everyone does their best to fulfill their responsibilities in the best way possible on their circumstances. I don't like anyone judging them, right? Judging them based on where they live, comparing their way of care with someone located closer.
Yeah,
that seems superficial for me, because I have seen, you can tell me, Rima, if I'm right or wrong, because I have seen people who stayed close have not done much for their parents.
Could I just comment? I love several of the points brought up. So I think your point, Pratima, about creating a support plan and making it systematic so that people, can reproduce it if you're not there. Creating a proper support network, those are excellent resources. That's an excellent resource. Having documented what you do, letting other people know this is what I'm concretely doing. That's wonderful. Your point about support being virtual and how that really is useful. That really echoed as a physician. During the pandemic, I've been entirely virtual. I'm a psychiatrist. So from March 2020 till now, I've been totally virtual. And I started to view my role as just prescribing medication. And so I was telling patients, you seem to be doing fine. Why don't I, talk to you in 3 weeks instead of 2? And they, sometimes people have said, no, I need you every 2 weeks. I said, well, what am I doing? And they're like, talking to you is very helpful for me. It makes, it calms me. Okay. So then I recognized, again, my role is it's not always just in person. Sometimes I can be helpful from a distance by supporting people. And then I just wanted to echo what Nisha ji said about the importance of dialogue. I think in America, we don't talk about death. We try to bury it. We try to keep it away from us. We're like, yeah, we know what's going to happen, but we're not going to talk about that. That's unpleasant. Let's not talk about this. And that's a problem. When we don't talk about aging, and death, then things hit us quickly. Or we're just in denial, and we have unpleasant outcomes, and then we say, oh, I should have done things differently before. So I love Nisha ji's point about really the importance of opening up dialogue, of talking about these things. I think in India, even though the resources may not be there as much, they may not be as robust, as many local resources, and you have to you kind of create your own support systems. People probably are more comfortable with death, and they, often have their parents in their homes or really do a better job taking care of their parents. Whereas in America, we may not as much on average, and we don't talk about death. So we may have the resources, but we don't get them to the people who need them. And we don't really, if we're not communicating about this, it's no good.
Yeah. I would like to actually, it's a long discussion. It cannot be made short at all, but I would definitely say that every family is unique. Every human is unique. Everyone's circumstances is unique. One cannot compare. We cannot expect a standard type of support or response from everyone, right? So people who genuinely love their parents will do everything possible to take care of them, whether they are inside that country like India or outside, or I can also use the word, let them stay in Mars, wherever they live, they can. If they want, they'll do in their own ways. I think in this country, because our organization, we talk more about how we can utilize resources. I always tell this, and I also try to put on our website, is that they can all, for long distance family caregiving, all support you can get is from this AARP. So many organizations, they help them in that. People who have Alzheimer's, you have Alzheimer's Association, you have National Association of area agencies on aging, and then you have NIH in this country, it's the National Institute of Aging. You have so many things here where they give resources to them and help them. That's one thing I wish, and I'm pretty sure even back in other countries too, they're going to get these type of resources. Maybe there, I'm not sure, because I've been away from India for a long time, so I'm not sure what type of different resources they may be getting there. But long story short, I can say is that how can we bring entire long distance caregivers can help is if you can help with their finances, pay their bills, if situations comes like this, coordinating information, right? Like if you are facilitating, the transfer of information between the professionals. In my case, I was trying to have a good support system even there, created a support system there. Then keeping friends and family members informed. So even though I know friends were doing more, I made sure to constantly inform them and and I always try to keep some paperwork in order in case of there's emergency. And that's the same case in this country or any country, is that getting your paperwork on place, and making sure that having that, to ensure there's a safe environment where your parents are living, the safe environment, basically home, right? Because if your father had stroke, and like my father had stroke, it was carefulness, are they even getting proper therapies, making tracking all those things, are they getting all that help? I used to keep track of those physical therapists coming from, in that country too, how they were able and really taking care of him, because otherwise it was, oh, okay, we are going daily to check your father. It's not that, right? I needed a report of them, how you were doing it. And that's why communication helps a lot if you're living far away. And I just say that just to end today's meet, and we can definitely, this is a running topic, Rima and Dr. Rohit, Nisha, we can always talk about this more and more, but I think each of us, your role as a long distance caregiver will all evolve over time, and we all need to be aligned with the evolving needs of our loved ones. And I hope everyone agrees with that. So I just want to end this little panel. I want to first of all thank Dr. Rohit and Rima. Do you want to say something before we end this particular talk today?
Yeah, thanks, Pratima. Just a couple of quick things. One of the things I've tried to do, and I'd love to know whether this resonates with you, is kind of try to distill my experience with caregiving, my experience as well as what I observed, into what I'm calling a 3R framework of caregiving, which is centered around respect, resilience, and realism. And those are the three things I learned. And a lot of the things we talked about today, kind of align with that framework. So to me, having respect for the person undergoing a certain situation, as well as the people taking care of them, being resilient, which was a huge challenge for me, I have to say, being non-technical completely, I was a mess. So I learned that, and that's another, very important tenet. And then realism, because the realism is about, kind of continuing to do what you can, but also realizing that, you can't fix every problem and solve every issue. And so that's what I'd like to leave. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Rima. And Dr. Rohit, do you want to say something to our viewers about this long distance caregiving?
Sure. I mean, I think so many great points been brought up today. I think Nisha again has pointed out the importance of dialogue, that really being able to talk about these issues, and obviously, Rima has written a book about them. So, having this, I think, is very useful. Having forums like this. Pratima, I think you have pointed out support systems and how useful it is, if you're a caregiver, to really kind of operationalize what you're doing so that other people can also do it in your absence if you have to go away. And otherwise, really just communicating, what it is that needs to be done for the person. That's a wonderful point about having a caregiving plan. And I like your last point as well, Pratima, about information, because I think often what we can do is coordinate information, like you said, is support. Like Rima just said, support caregivers who are actually in the trenches. But in terms of information, one last point I wanted to add was just that, if we know physicians here, if someone's under the care of a physician in India, we can also consult with physicians here to make sure that the care is proper. I would say with my grandmother who passed away in India, she had a hip fracture and she was told to be in bed for 6 months after that. My father said, that's a terrible idea. She won't be able to get up and walk. Her muscles will atrophy. And that's exactly what happened. But unfortunately, my father was not able to effect change. He was a physician, but he couldn't effect change. And then also one of his cousins passed away of a rare cancer. My father's an oncologist. It was just a very sad situation. He couldn't, really get through to the doctor there to point out that some different things should be done. But as much as possible, I mean, if we are able to harness the power of, the physicians we know here and just double check, just make sure that the caregiving, the care that is being given by physicians and other medical professionals is appropriate, not to micromanage, obviously, but just to make sure it's appropriate, not just totally down the wrong path. That would be helpful as well. But again, I think, the 3 R's they make a lot of sense. That's a, very wise framework. So thank you so much for offering this wisdom. And thank you so much to all of you for
thank you, Dr.
from what I've learned.
I do want to mention here that everyone, whether in faraway countries and away from US or within US, everyone should make utilizing right resources is important. Like everyone can find out, the local geriatric case managers or care managers who can help them with the decisions. Mm-hmm. So it's very critical that, all of them should keep in touch with their home care agencies if they're working with, which I do right now a lot, to just make sure that everything is up to date, up to time. I constantly keep in touch with my dad's case manager. And this is very important. And I think even back in other countries, because we all are from India, and we know that, definitely I'm 100% sure now that there are, if they can find out that there are so many geriatric case managers there too, if they need to find out, dig in for the right resources, and and they will answer their questions, regarding, the different type of innovative services now they're providing. In every country now, everyone has started with different softwares for taking care of seniors. So in what way that can be helpful? And I think that's where comes our organization too, even though if they're not from US, and if they have parents in India, and if they need any sort of resources back there, and they can always approach us, and one of us can help them out, connecting with them with the right resources there. We'll try our best, we'll try our best to help them. So Nisha, do you want to say anything else before we end the call today?
I would just like to thank all of you for a wonderful discussion today, and I would personally like to continue it and explore more how we can make caregiving a joyful experience, staying far away from our parents, our families. So Pratima, let's continue this discussion. And as you rightly said, it's difficult to come to a conclusion or even expect a solution right away. So I'm so glad Volunteering for Seniors has taken this initiative on itself in starting a dialogue. So let's continue doing this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for being here today. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.